glad you could join me again today. We took two little quizzes last week to help us determine which kind of wisdom is controlling our life, the wisdom from above or the wisdom from beneath. And James is going to start out with chapter 4 here in verse 1 and refer us back to that wisdom that is from beneath. When he asks us his first question, from whence come wars and fightings among you? Come they not hence even of your lusts that war in your members? He's picking up from chapter 3, verse 14, where he says, if you have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not and lie not against the truth. And so he poses us another question that we need to remember. Where is my problem coming from? That's what he's asking you in verse 1. From whence, from where do wars and fightings come to you? And don't they come they not hence, even from your lusts that war in your member? Aren't they coming from the inside, things that you want? And you know the answer is really not very pretty, is it? It's usually a wrong motive on our behalf that causes the struggles in our life. We want something done, we want things fixed or changed, we want justice or satisfaction. We aren't content and just want things to be done our way, and we think that our way is best, and so we push and we fight and we quarrel and we lash out and we work behind the scenes and we manipulate to get what we want, and then we wonder why people are so upset. Listen to James' description of how we act here in chapters 2 to verses 2 to 5. And he says, you lust and you have not, you kill and you desire to have and cannot obtain. You fight and war, yet you have not because you ask not. You ask and receive not because you ask amiss, that you might consume it upon your lusts. Ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be the friend of the world is the enemy of God. Do you think that the scripture saith in vain, the spirit that dwelleth in us lusteth to envy? Isn't that a sad thing? Here's what he's saying. We are selfish. We're self-focused, and we just really don't care who gets hurt in the fray. We want what we want, and we will fight and kill and struggle till we get what we want. We can compare that to Genesis chapter 6 and verse 5, where it says, God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thought of his heart was only evil continually. We are sinners, aren't we? Evil thoughts produce evil actions, and that is just the nature of the beast. It's who we are. We have a sinful nature. But in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 at 5, it says that love thinketh no evil. So this warring and fighting should not be a part of our Christian life. We're a new man. We need to have a renewed spirit, a renewed attitude, renewed thoughts, renewed actions. And this selfishness is a pushing that's coming from pride. In verse 6 says, wherefore God resisteth the proud, but he giveth grace unto the humble. So the question is, do we want God's resistance or do we want his grace? You know, and just as the Bible holds many, many verses on the tongue, it is full of verses about pride. One of my favorite ways to study my Bible is to take a word or a topic and run it through a topical Bible and learn all I can. And I remember when pride was a subject, one year God and I looked at verses about pride for month after month after month, and he taught me so much. And even today, when prideful thoughts come into my mind, I can hear him whisper, Gail, that's pride. Sometimes I can pay attention, and other times, the wars and the fighting still start, don't they? Because I want my way. But you know, if you take a time to make a real study on pride, you'll be amazed at how much it creeps into your conversation, your daily preparation, your work in the workplace, your attitude and decision-making and relationships. Pride is a very deceitful thing. So let's just look at 6 verses from the book of Proverbs. Some of them you might have heard before. Proverbs 11 verse 2 says, when pride cometh, then cometh shame, but with the lowly is wisdom. Do you want shame or do you want wisdom? Proverbs 16 verse 5 says, everyone that is proud in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Though hand join in hand, he shall not be unpunished. God resisteth the proud. Proverbs 29:23, a man's pride shall bring him low, but honor shall uphold the humble in spirit. In verse 16-18 of Proverbs, pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 26:12, seest thou a man wise in his own conceit? there is more hope of a fool than of him. And Proverbs 8:13 says, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride, and arrogancy, and the evil way, and the froward mouth do I hate. So if pride is in our heart, it's going to come out in our words. So let's look at the qualities, though, as James moves on with this big warning about pride and ugliness. He comes back to the idea of the humble inner life, and it's important that we see this because this is what's evidenced in a conscious Christian life. If we're living for the wisdom that's from above, as we looked at in the last chapter, then we're going to see these things coming out in our life. So in verse 7, he says, submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. We will see submission. We will know submission to God and resistance of evil. We'll recognize the devices of the enemy, and we will daily seek to obey God, to hear and do. There's those two key words again, to do what he's saying instead of what our selfishness demands. And do you see the promise? That if we resist the devil, he will flee from us. We can have victory in this area. And verse 8 says, draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. You know, God's nearness will be with us. He is there every moment. He's there to cleanse, to purify. He's there to help us to be undivided, not double-minded. And that will not be a part of our character. We will be single-minded, loving God in submission and humility. And verse 9 says, be afflicted and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to heaviness. And you might think this is kind of an odd little passage to put in here. But what James is saying is that you need to lay aside mirth and mourn when you see pride taking place. When strivings happen, when you find yourself indulging in the wrong things, then you need to have godly sorrow and repentative tears. Don't just laugh it off. It's a very serious affront to God. So we need to rein in this pride and bring it into submission to God. And verse 10 says, personal humility, humble yourselves in the sight of God, and he shall lift you up. And Matthew 23:12 reads similarly, and whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. God rewards humility. He never rewards pride. Isn't that amazing? He works differently than we want to be promoted, so we strut around, we call attention to ourselves, we make a big show. But God says that he will exalt us and promote us if we will simply lay ourselves at his feet, if we don't make a noise, but fully trust him. And I've seen this happen so many times in my life, and I've heard the testimony of others. And when they resisted the temptation to make a noise or to blow their own horn and chose to wait quietly and faithfully on the Lord, the reward was 10 times better. God has a way of rewarding our humility that we just can't explain. I hope you'll take that into practice this week. Look at pride. Look at the pride in your life. See, is it causing wars and fightings among you? Then you need to leave it. You need to let it go. Resist it. Humble yourself before the Lord and let him sort everything out. I'll see you next week.